The Federal Reserve is raising interest rates for the first time since 2018.
But we're in a very, very different place with high inflation.
In the United States, inflation has rocketed.
It was higher than expected.
7.9%.
7.9%.
I think there's quite a bit of room to raise interest rates.
Raising by 50 basis points.
If we conclude that it is appropriate to move more aggressively, we will do so.
So over the past 2 years, we've seen some major macroeconomic events happening all around the world.
We've seen zero interest rates, and we've also seen huge money printing. And obviously, now a steep rise in inflation.
And you know what the scariest thing is about all of it is that in the next few years or whenever, we are going to have to start dealing with the consequences of all of this. Die Nachgevolge. You know, this is not some doomsday prediction, it's just the truth.
And just a few days ago, I got a call from my good buddy Jerome Powell, and he made mention to the fact that they are probably going to raise it 6 more times this year, and apparently there's nothing you or I can do about it. So I told him, thanks a lot for your service.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding basically about the former part, but the latter, there's absolutely nothing we can do about the fact that they have decided to increase interest rates. Interest rates are going to now affect us all. And all that you and I can possibly do anything about is accept the fact that it is going to happen. But what we can do to protect ourselves is basically watch our expenditure and our debts and make sure that we don't just buy things unnecessarily, especially if it's got an interest rate attached to it. You don't want to do that, so think before you buy. But what's really unfortunate is that a lot of people around the world are going to be caught off guard with the fact that there are interest rate rises coming in the next few days, weeks, years, we won't know, but they are coming. And I found that really sad because there are a few ways that we can avoid getting caught up with the consequences of interest rate hikes. And that brings us to today's video. We're going to talk about 5 big money traps that you need to avoid in the coming year. Money trap number 1, financing a vehicle that you do not need.
This could mean that maybe you have 2 vehicles, when really you could easily make do with 1. Or maybe it could also mean that you're financing quite a lavish or luxury vehicle that you just do not need.
Either way, you've taken out debt more than you really needed to. And if I guess for most people, the majority will have their car payments being secondary to their house payments on the expense list. They are just as high.
The loan for financing a car usually isn't small, and if a large chunk of that debt has a variable or linked to prime interest rate, then your car payments will get more and more expensive over the coming years.
So essentially, you'll be paying a lot more on your monthly premiums, but you won't be paying down the principal, which you probably think you are, but you're actually just paying down more interest because of the interest rate fluctuations. It's just more interest that is coming. So if you do have a big car loan, or medium size, I guess, you need to look out for things like this.
Firstly, check how much you still owe, and then work out how much interest you're paying every single month. And then figure out whether you can financially handle it if the interest portion maybe doubles or triples over the next year or 2.
If you do decide that I don't want to deal with this, well, I've got some good news for you. You see, with regards to the chip shortages that are happening all around the world, new car production is very scarce and it's hard to come by, which means second-hand cars are actually going sky high price-wise. And you can probably get a better price for your vehicle than you might expect. It's just something to consider if you don't want to deal with something like this. Money trap number 2, overextending on your mortgage.
It's the exact same story as money trap number 1. It's just a different asset or liability class.
Yes, I said asset or liability, because this is also dependent on the reason why you bought the property in the first place. Is it an investment or did you buy it to live in it? Because if you are living in it, that makes it a liability. And so if interest rates rise, well, you guessed, variable/linked interest rate will also rise. And a problem we've been seeing over the past 10 years is that all over the world, because of such low interest rates that we've had, well, everywhere besides South Africa, a lot of people have had the advantage and taken advantage of the fact that they can borrow money to buy an asset like property for an investment purpose.
But because of all this buying from people getting it on the cheap mortgages, it's rocketed houses pricing, so much so that if you were looking at buying a house in 2022, chances are you're going to have to commit to a substantially larger amount of debt than say 8 to 10 years ago.
Now obviously I don't want to tell you what to do with your money. It is a personal matter, so you probably know best about what you need to do with your money matters.
I mean, that is your personal business. But if you're looking to buy a house, I think it would be very wise to really consider how much mortgage you are willing to take on.
Especially if you are looking at linked or variable interest rates on a loan. It seems like in the US, you guys can leave a comment below if this is true, you guys have access to a 30-year fixed mortgage, which means that they've got fixed rates or fixed interest rates for the next 30 years after putting in that loan and taking on a mortgage. We don't have something like that here. And I know for a fact that the banks here will obviously only give you a fixed rate for up to, I think, 5 years, and thereafter it becomes linked or variable.
Pretty much all mortgages turn into variable or linked rate loans after a certain number of years.
So if you know of someone who's looking at getting into a variable rate interest loan for buying an investment like a property, just be wary not only of your initial payments that you are going to be paying from the get-go, but also estimate what your payments will be, let's say, if the interest rates had to double or triple over the next 12 months. And can you afford that? Oh, and another thing. If you are one of those lucky ones who can actually land your hands on a contract that has a 30-year fixed rate, I would consider getting into the market. My personal opinion, this is not financial advice, but if you are looking at it yourself, I would rather look at getting into it now as soon as possible, because the interest rates for those are climbing as well, from 3.45% to about 4.72% already. And there's only one way it's going, and that's north. Money trap number 3, credit card debt.
Do you know that the average credit card debt for a South African is 21,904 Rand per account, as per Trade Union's findings in Q3 of 2021. There is a link in the description if you want to go and see that article. Now, I won't spend too long talking about credit cards here, but I hope you're noticing that there's a recurring theme.
The big money traps that we are discussing here today are all related in some way or form. And why, you might be asking? Well, it's because they're all linked to something called debt. Now, debt comes with an interest rate of some form, whether that's fixed or variable, it has an interest rate. And one thing that we can be certain of is that the interest rates over the next coming years are going to rise, as we have seen, or as we have been told.
And I'm pretty sure you guessed it already. The easiest way to avoid financial hardship across the board is simply to avoid the effects of rising interest rates. So, aka minimize your variable rate debts.
You know what? If you do not take anything else from this video, this one single piece of value that I'm giving you today, just minimize your debt loads as much as possible. And by doing that, you know for a fact that any interest rate hikes or rises coming future will not hurt you as much or at all, because you've done your due diligence. And so the same thing goes for credit card debt, which is sometimes something a little bit sticky to talk about. But people don't seem to understand that even though it's a smaller amount of debt that you're creating in comparison to something like a car or your house, you don't realize that on these smaller debts, these institutions have astronomical interest rates compared to buying, let's say, a property or a vehicle. Buying things on a credit card comes with a very high rate of return for the bank.
Do you know that the average credit card interest rate in South Africa ranges between 7% and 17.5% per annum, and could be as high as 20.5% according to the National Credit Regulator? While maybe a 1% or 2% rise in credit card interest rates doesn't actually shift the needle as much as a mortgage going from 3 to 4%, but do not underestimate it. It's still definitely something to think about, and also remember that credit cards are generally one of the biggest money traps, period.
But now, on a serious note, even under normal circumstances, no one should be flirting with credit card debt, even under normal economic situations or circumstances. It is just not a smart thing to be doing. Money trap number 4, keeping most or majority of your net worth in cash.
But for most people, They think cash is safe, but over the long term, that is wrong. Why? Well, the annual US inflation rate is currently 7.9%, and in South Africa, it's supposedly averaging 4.5%.
This means that the average price was 5 times to 8 times less about a year ago, which means that not only is the buying price needed to buy certain items going higher and prices going up, your buying power of your dollar or rands is actually going down. I think, let's make a quick example here.
If you had 100,000 in the bank this time last year, that same 100,000 is now effectively only worth 92,000 due to inflation.
So you see, this is what they do not tell you or teach us in school. Because inflation is so high at the moment, investors, what they are doing are actually looking for places to park their money, meaning assets and cash producing assets for that matter, that give them a positive cash flow for their money. Assets such as stocks, bonds, real estate, gold, silver, and others that can hold their value while providing you with a rate of return that can try and negate or attack against the negative effects of inflation or high inflation. For example, over the last 12 months, the S&P 500 has grown by 17%. So even though inflation was near 8% or 7.9, whatever it is right now, if your or majority of your net worth was still tied up in the stock market, especially the S&P 500 for example, you would have beat inflation by 9%. That is still a damn good return on your money. I mean, better than any bank will give you. Now, this isn't without all of its risks. The S&P could possibly have not performed as well as it did, but having an ultra long-term approach on your investment strategies, like many investors do, they would keep their money invested in the stock market or whatever assets they have, knowing that it is better than keeping it in cash. And historically, it has been proven already many times over that it was better to stay in the market, not to sell your assets, to stay in the market than to rather have been in cash. Money trap number 5, having no money in the bank or niks geld. Now, I know you guys are probably thinking this is contradicting to the previous trap that I just mentioned about not keeping cash, but it's not. Trust me. Let me explain this.
It's still important to make sure that you have some sort of cash pile stacked away where it's accessible very easily.
So with all that's happening in the world right now, all around us, stocks are swinging all over the place. Inflation is affecting everything. Potentially not being able to go to work if you get that dreaded flu, then we're probably going to run into some situation someday in the future where we are going to run into an unforeseen expense. And that is where this type of cash will come in handy. I know me personally, I feel like I sleep better at night just knowing that I've got a few thousand packed away in a bank account or stashed under your mattress, if you like it that way, just for unforeseen expenses popping up and showing face. And then you can easily sort them out with that little bit. I mean, what happens if you actually get one day an unforeseen medical bill that you have to fit, or you have your car break down? And I don't want to be a potty pooper, but for the fact that cars, a year from now or a few months from now, servicing your car is going to be a lot more expensive than you've just paid when you had your service. So that cash is definitely going to come in handy. I mean, you don't want to then at that time be wishing you had a safety net of cash. Rather just do it, then you know you've made provision for something like that to happen. Look, inflation is a nasty thing. No one likes it, but it's happening to the entire world and everyone's going to have to face it. So the only thing we can do is just accept the fact that it is happening, because it is a volatile period for everyone. And not just here, I'm talking about everywhere around the world. So when it comes to price hikes, the best solution towards that unforeseen circumstances would be to have a stash of cash or a safety net waiting for those things. Rather be proactive than reactive towards these things. Now, while I wouldn't put majority of my net worth in cash, i.e. the bank, it has its place in today's world. It is fitting for certain situations and unforeseen circumstances, as we previously explained. But there you have it, guys. That is the 5 big money traps that we'll probably have to try and avoid this year. But really the main things are that we need to try and avoid getting hurt or being affected by interest rate hikes or spiking inflation of that sort. But anyway, I really hope you got value and enjoyed this video. If you wouldn't mind, share this video with someone that you know would like to see this type of content, or is debating some of these money traps or getting into some of these money traps, and you want to share this thing with them so that they can open their eyes a little bit towards this before they make decisions. But if you did enjoy it, please consider subscribing to the channel, put on that notification bell and like the video. Leave your thoughts in the comment section. Tell me what you thought about it. Is there something I missed out that you would like to hear more about? Or is there something else you want me to look at doing on this channel? I'd love to hear from you. Until next one, cheers.